Are they a relevant organisation, would you say, Ian? But they seem to be.
Are we recording this?
No.
Hang on. I just started that. I can stop.
No, go on. I'll put it on record. Yes, they are. It's the Fire Sector Federation is it's designed to be a unifying voice for all of the different parts of the fire industry and construction industry that touch upon fire-related things. It's always been a little bit dysfunctional. I think I attended their AG the last time I was, and it may have improved because it's a few years since I've been involved, but I attended their AGM a few years ago, and it was like the wedding out of the Game of Thrones.
I remember you saying that. Yeah, I remember you saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, that aside, there's some very relevant people in that organisation, and I always supported it because it's not so relevant to FIS, so we're not involved. But I always supported it when I was more directly involved because no thing worth doing is easy, is it? And I think that all the conflict is born out of the fact it is quite a dysfunctional. It's a dysfunctional set of requirements for the fires. You've got fire service, you've got the client organisations, you've got the relevant parts of the fire industry, and you've got the construction sector. And to be honest, quite often it's vested interest is the barrier to change. Not everyone's kind of looking at what they can make out of the change process rather than driving change, which is the.
Yeah, I was going to come on to that. I've put a web address for the FPA, George. They're probably more mature in terms of the way they go about that sort of thing. I hadn't heard until this morning of the other organisation you just referred to, who sound like a relatively new thing, unless it's just me being out of touch.
No, I think they're sort of an aggregation. So I think the FPA are a heavy voice. John O'Neill used to be heavily involved. So it's sadly departed. He passed a couple of weeks ago. He used to be heavily involved and was on the board of the Fire Sector Federation thing. So the two do work together. I think all the FSF meetings I attended were at Bircham, not Bircham Newton, Moorland the Marsh, where the FPA are based. So.
Oh wow! Are they based there as well?
Well, it's not really a thing. That's the thing. It's a coming together of lots of. You see what I mean? It's kind of not.
Okay, so they're not an ASFP here. Then they don't have members.
No, it's more like sort of a construction leadership council type thing. It's more that type of.
You're not selling it, Ian.
I'm not. I'm also not buying it, which probably the straight from you. It was a fair. I remember when I was involved, it was a fairly nominal sum. As I say, it put me in contact with the fire and rescue authority, fire and rescue service, and other things. But you realise how much other people. I mean, I think the issue that I had at the time, that was going on at the time, was an issue nothing to do with anything we were involved in, but some kind of issue with the fires. There's the union for the fire officers, and then there's the Chief Fire Officers Association, and it was some kind of issue between those two that seemed to be where all the problems were. So you've got unions around the table with trade associations, so it's everybody's got a different view on how things should move, and inevitably they didn't. So
going back to your original point, George, in terms of advice, and I'm not talking about fire doors here, but any other fire stopping service penetrations, like Ian was alluding to, there's a whole industry. Mainly ambulance chasing type organisations, of people who will approach your customers, who own buildings with people in them, and say, we can find fault with the fire installation, with the fire protection on these buildings for a fee, and you can go chasing after your builder for recompense. And there is an entire industry has grown up over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
Working on that basis. It's an absolute scandal. But what's happening at the moment is there's a lot of people out there who have basically got a digital camera and a little bit of knowledge. Unfortunately, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. So more and more people are sort of looking to some sort of accreditation. So I've just stuck up there an ISO that I would point your customers toward. find out whether or not these guys are accredited, or is this just a couple of likely lads with a digital camera who can pop the head above the ceiling and take some snaps, because there's a lot of that going on at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's exactly why I'm trying to address this, in part because I think there's a real danger of a lot of doors being condemned that don't need to be condemned.
Yeah, the doors I don't think it covers. Doors will be covered by another sort of licensing, Ian will know more, scheme. I mean, Ian will know more. We were on this journey 10 years ago, I think it was, trying to get some rationality into fire doors, let alone everything else.
Yeah. So what we're doing, Martin, is this whole thing about inspection. I absolutely agree with you that we need to get some degree of standardization there. And if there are already standards, I mean, Ian's referred me to standards before as well. I think if there are standards, then let's use them. If they need reinforcing, and we need to get more people to agree to use them, then that's really what I think our coordination role is.
There's a big gap, isn't there? I think the big gap is that standards are recommended, and so they don't tend to have legal status. And the challenge is that through the construction process, we don't specify them. So what we should be doing is pushing towards a performance, where it's performance-based specification and with leading into maintenance, we should be specifying the standards that support the compliance. And then they end up in the program, and then they're not recommended, they're required. I think there's a big gap around this where people, nobody's paying for the standards. You look at the sales of standards, and they're relatively small compared to the number of people who should understand what's in them. And as I say, so you've got all these standards, they're out there. It's information management standards, maintenance standards, procurement standards that the architects just don't stick in the bloody specifications. And I don't know if I presume they know they exist. I don't know. But it would give us half. I think so I've been mulling over this a lot lately, is what's going to happen at Gateway 2 and products. Is it going to be product specification or performance specification? It's got to be one or the other, but it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. But if it is going down the performance specification route, then they are going to have, if they want to maintain their integrity as a principal designer, then they've got to specify these standards to go with the products. It's got to be process and product-based specification. And then, Martin, when you're tendering for it, that's what's in the standard, isn't it? You've got to show how you're going to comply with those standards, and equally, when you're passing it on to the supply chain, they're going to have to show how they meet the standards. Everyone's going to have to understand the bloody standards.
Yeah, it leads on to the wider question of whether or not they're ready for this. And you suggested last time, Ian, that we should try and get the REBA stages, or our concerns about the REBA stages, and shifting those to the left across to REBA.
I got asked something really concerning to me the other week on that, and
Go on.
I stood my ground and said no. But I don't know if the initiative is going to carry on anyway. I'm involved in a working group for the Construction Leadership Council looking at professional indemnity insurance.
Yeah.
And the concern's been raised from the specification end that they can't get the level of PI cover that they need in order to design the works.
Yeah.
So as a consequence, rather than dealing with that as a problem, which is what I thought this whole group was about, they've written a letter to government, and this is semi-confidential, so I'm sharing it because I've been asked on it. But and I don't know where it's going to go, is that they've penned a letter to government to be approved by the Construction Leadership Council to say, can they be exempted from having professional indemnity insurance?
Yeah.
And I was asked to support the letter being on the working group. And I said emphatically no, because you've got, if professional indemnity insurance is broken, we should be working to an insurance model that supports the sector, not sticking this rather clumsy patch over it. And B, the risk hasn't gone anywhere. So that all they've done is they've taken the safety net away from the supply chain, which is going to be expected to absorb that risk. So I can't see it's in our interest to. So whilst I understand it potentially unlocks a block in the marketplace, at my end of the
It just
supply
transfers
chain,
the risk.
yeah, I
It just
just see
transfers
you've
the
got
risk.
more risk. So I said I couldn't in all conscience sign the letter because the whole process felt flawed to me.
Mm.
And it does pick up on this, that this issue is that at stage 2 or gateway 2, stage 3 of Reba Planner Works, then we're not ready to build it. The designers aren't ready to give us any further information. We've just got this bloody great void sat around gateway 2.
So we're bringing that up through the CIC.
Yeah.
And that's been put on our agenda. And I think we BB are sort of chair on one of the working groups for the duration or for a period. I'm not sure. It's one of the MDs is sitting on it, and I've been raising it with him. Everybody's seeing this now, that the whole thing needs. You can't be designing once you've started digging holes.
No, exactly.
Everybody in the industry is seeing it. I suspect the architects are seeing it, but they're not getting the fees to cover the design that's required prior to starting on site. And it's gonna reflect on the people who are commissioning work, which is mainly developers and His Majesty's government. They're going to have to put more money up front in order to carry on with the development and with the industry as it is. But I think that's slowly dawning on people. So like I say, we're going to draw people's attention to it formally through the CIC. We did, as an organisation, we did have a session with Judith Hackett, and that was one of the topics that raised its head. And she said, "Yeah, feedback, because otherwise you're just going to get steamroller."
Yeah. And those Sidewise have had a good stab at it, actually, Martin. They shared it. I don't know if it's for public consumption or it's because George and I were involved in a Sidewise event the other week. They sponsored a round table, and they shared with me in advance. They've had a really good stab at lining up the gateways and the standards on sort of a flow diagram. And they admit it's not perfect, but what, if anything, what it does show is that, again, that detailing of design development kind of ends up being lumped in as a mush. Even in the way that they've done it to try and break it down, it's still lumped in as a mush and isn't being. You can see it, even when they've tried to clarify it, you can see it's not clear. If you get my drift.
Yeah.
I'll ask Chris from there if it's all right for me to share it further with this group, because I think my overriding comment was, well, it's a lot better than anything we've done. So it's progress.
Okay.
And I've also shared if you want to share it with your MDs doing the work with the CIC, that's the procurement research that we've done with Reading University. That's the final result of it, which came out a couple of weeks ago. And that's, again, for us, it paints a picture of the time pressure the sector's under.
Yeah.
So it really does it really does show some of the issues and some of the cultures that are bleeding through. But it's done as a main contractor and specialist subcontractor, and you can sort of see how the problems accelerate as they go through. You look at it, there's a problem at main contractor end, and it becomes a bigger problem at specialist contractor end. So I think it's quite balanced. It's not a main contractor bashing report. It's not designed to be. It's just there to show how the sort of procurement processes are putting pressure on the supply chain and sort of play back some of the sentiment. So there is a few main contractor bashing points in there, which Construction News picks up, but that was more from dialogue. It wasn't stuff that was said by Stuart. It was stuff that people said as part of the research, if you see what I mean, because he did a load of interviews as well as the qualitative stuff.
Yeah.
Quantitative stuff.
Yeah, no, I think I've actually shared it with our procurement director. So we're out there.
I was talking with an architect last week, and they were saying that they were talking about how they need to gear their processes up to respond to the DFES, because the DFES's gateways or deadlines now, work stages, are just crazy. They've got to have everything done within 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So the need for it's quite a challenge.
Interesting times, but I think there's going to be what Ian was calling there, some sort of blockage. that's going to need unblocking for sort of developments that are coming through the pipeline. Or I think more and more people are going to say, well, hang on, you're not ready.
Yeah.
And when you have got ready, we need to engage. There's going to be a lot of work to do before we start digging holes. You're not in that position yet. You need to do an awful lot, and then when you get in touch with us, there's an awful lot to do. And I just don't think a lot of the professional designers are being covered for all that additional work that's required before mobilisation onto site. They're still looking at the old-fashioned REBA document, which it's the most amazing document because it's never named in any contract, and yet it governs the timeline in the program. When you think about it,
Yeah.
That's clever. That's influential, isn't it? Imagine that. Nobody refers to it. You can't fail on it, and yet it determines how the success of the job.
So you mean the plan of work?
Yeah.
It's bizarre, isn't it? Yeah, that's a great point. It's never referenced in a contract.
No.
I'll tell you what, some of the cases that are going through at the moment are absolutely giving me sleepless nights.
Yeah.
That Lend-Lease one versus oncology was another hideous one in terms of it's because that one was the client had signed off the amendment, didn't they? So the design had been changed, signed off by the client or through the client process, but because Lend-Lease still had design and build responsibility and it was subsequently deemed to be questionable, they've awarded against.
Wow.
Yeah, so you think, so we had ESL which told us you can't caveat, even if under pressure you can't caveat, and we've had that on Lend-Lease versus St John's Oncology, which tells us even if the client signed it off, you might still cop for it.
Going to make people very wary, isn't it? Very wary.
Yeah, I was
bring us back into this. I know we're sort of drifting off, but it does bring us back into this because the information, all of these things, it's the information management is nowhere near where it needs to be at the moment.
Martin, was it you saying that one of the architects that worked for you, you've had to make a claim against them and they've folded? I can't remember whether it was you or somebody else told me that.
It may have happened. I don't think I've said it. I don't think
you're not aware of that.
I'm not aware of that one, no.
No.
But having said, if Balpers have done that, it wouldn't surprise me because that's there's a lot going on at the moment. But yeah, no, it's not something I'm conscious of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just passionately against risk transfer as a methodology, and I think you can only manage risk. You can't actually transfer it.
Yeah.
You might be able to. You increase risk by trying to transfer it and trying to put the things in place to transfer it.
It's interesting because where you're at with your head there is probably one step ahead of where the majority of architects that we interface with are. They're still at the understanding this rather than trying to get out of it. It's an amazing scheme. Not 100 miles from where I'm sat. Big office block. Lovely architects. Not national, but proper architects practice. Local. And we've been, the guys have been banging into them for the last 3 months. It's all news to them. All this, you need this level of detail before we start. What's going on? It's unbelievable. Unbelievable amount of unacknowledged sort of knowledge going on at the moment. Yeah, blissfully unaware.
Yeah, so coming back to what you were just saying there about what the regulator is going to be asking for. One of the things that we've been looking at, and this is one of the reasons I'm pursuing this this inspection sort of work stream, is that the information, the interdependency of the different asset types that go to provide the mitigation, looking at the compartment wall, for example, coming back to the relationship between, all the components that go to make up the compartment wall. And then how does that then interface with the smoke control system? And how does it go with the alarm system, for example? Those are such critical relationships that just doing fire door inspections, for example, it doesn't actually tick the box, and yet that is the way the industry and landlords are procuring their services. They're not looking at things in that holistic way. Now,
No.
I can understand why, because if you're going to get somebody to come and inspect fire dampers, you need somebody that knows about fire dampers, and it's unlikely to be the same person that knows about fire doors.
Yeah. Oh, it won't be the same person. You also, there's a lot more technical know-how needed with the fire dampers. You will need quite a lot more in-depth knowledge of the fire strategy, and you're going to have to look at drawings and things like that. So it's fire doors tend to be you see what you see sort of thing. It's a fire door because it's labelled as such.
You're not always going to see the dampers, right? It's the thing.
Yeah.
In a live project environment, how do you get access to?
Then I was going to say, probably to do it properly, and this goes back to the ambulance chases, with a damper, you need to do some intrusive investigation. So you need to cause damage in order to, often you have to cause damage in order to do the inspection properly. Now, very few people are willing to do that, particularly if it's a firewall. And it's just, for me, it's a definition of insanity, going out of your way to prove that something's not right. It's kind of like breaking up your foundations to prove you haven't got enough reinforcement cover.
Yeah.
But it's going on. It's going on. It's going on heavily in the PFI market as we speak.
The mindset, the opportunity, though, is there, isn't there? Because part of some work we're doing on strip out actually is that what should be available is the information for inspection should be available, and you shouldn't need to physically inspect it. So what we should have is if in an ideal world, if I was looking for fire dampers, if I was looking to inspect the fire dampers, what would I be looking for? What can I see? What can't I see on a construction site? And if I can't see it, where's the photograph of it?
That's exactly right. That's what the golden thread's all about.
Yeah. That's
what we're working on.
It's the inspection mindset, isn't it, that we need, even if we can't physically do the inspection.
Yeah. The methodology that we're using on the fire doors, and we've got a meeting tomorrow on smoke control. So we're going to suggest the same methodology. Is there's 3 types of inspection. One is the inspection of the new thing that's gone in to make sure that it's been installed properly, and the digital record of that it's been installed properly is there. That's only ever done once. The second inspection is to inspect something that you don't have the digital record for, and therefore you need to find out what it is, and that's where you would need possibly an intrusive inspection, or certainly a really good desktop exercise of looking at the record information. And again, that's only ever done once. So it then becomes the baseline against which the third level of inspection comes, and that is the regular inspection.
Have you done anything on hazard identification in that? Because the big risk is somebody's done something. So we sort of need a record. It's almost like if your risk assessment, a method statement approach, isn't it? That we need a risk assessment done on what could have gone wrong. Because the one I remember is the and you might remember this one as well, Martin, when there was a realization how people were cleaning ducting systems, which was principally by spraying hot caustic soda up them, which isn't great if you've got a load of intermittent materials providing protection through the system. So that's kind of the hazard that we need to identify to say how, you know, what is its maintenance cycle, how is it being maintained, and will this add a risk too? So it's almost like there's another tier of inspection required, which is sort of a hazard identification. Are you likely to have done anything to it which has compromised its performance in the past 12 months, i.e. cleaned it, maintained it, or whatever I can't think of another hazard. I can't think of another one for those particular systems, but
well, that's exactly what we have been doing as well, Ian. In the work that we did last year that Joe helped with, or the year before, actually, thinking about it, where we actually did 12 key asset types. One of them was sprinkler systems, for example. And certainly I learned that the normal way that when they test sprinkler systems, dry sprinkler systems, is by obviously filling them with water and testing them. But then to drain them again, they typically pump oxygen into to blow the water out. But that then creates oxidization. And therefore the sprinkler system is damaged and therefore starts to leak.
It can be damaged by chemical attack from the outside as well, can't it? So you get the erosion of the pipes due to chemicals and proximity as well. That's been
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So your three types of inspection, George, is the legacy inspection. It was never done before, so you're doing it for the first time on something that exists.
Yes.
There's the inspection of the work once it's gone in, which should be that should be a principal contractor role or supply chain role, shouldn't it? That should be something you should be able to ask for now, 2023.
Yeah.
And then the other one is presumably the maintenance and routine inspection. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And that's it. That seems a very simple, straightforward way of looking at it.
Yeah. The biggest cause of failure with fire doors failing in terms of their integrity isn't the door or the frame, it's the junction between the frame and the surround.
Yes.
And in order to see that, you have to smash the architraves off.
Yeah.
Which is where you get into destructive mechanisms or destructive sort of thinking.
Yeah.
Actions.
That's where
prior to proving there's a defect.
That's a detail that should be routinely photographed before, because that's a
going forward. You're absolutely right.
It's not going to get that's not going to be a worsening situation, is it? Unless somebody's tried to plumb something through.
No, that's only going to get better. You're right. But for these legacy sort of inspections that George is referring to do it properly, you will have to damage the integrity of the wall. By smashing the architrave.
Panel above the door as well, isn't it? That's the one that often falls between the cracks of the fire door inspection or any other inspection. Is who's responsible for the panel above it? Because again, that will quite often be misspecified, wouldn't it?
Or the panel in it, or the air transfer grill in it. There's quite a lot goes on.
Yeah.
Well, that bloody letterbox guy, what's his name? Effin, what's it that posts about letterboxes all the time?
And cat flaps.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I think he turned up to an ASFP event when I was speaking on the panel. I suddenly spotted him as Wilf started saying, "We're going to come across. If there's any questions?" I was desperately trying to catch Wilf's eye to try and ignore his hand going up because you knew where this was going to go into a wormhole. And he started reading a letter that he'd written to somebody 5 years ago. Oh, jeez. Yes, the letterboxes. He's got a point, actually. It's just it just makes it so bloody badly that it's easy to overlook.
Yeah, sure. One of the interesting things is that the of the fire door inspectors, and I don't think these guys are ambulance chasers, Martin. They've been Ian Kavanagh, for example, he was actually originally a manufacturer. Or he's involved in manufacturing, but I think he's been an independent fire door inspector for
there are genuine bona fide fire door inspectors out there.
But he was saying that
there's also a lot of cowboys, George.
No, exactly. But he was saying that he's yet to come across a compliant door.
Yeah.
New one.
Yeah.
A new one. Yeah. So, and certainly, we're doing a project with Barclay at the moment, and they've fed to us that in terms of their fire door inspections, they're only 25% are passing.
Okay, it's not bad.
Is that right?
Terrible, isn't it? How easy something so easy is made so difficult. Ian Kavanagh's a good person to listen to. It was Dale Joinery that he used to own.
Right.
And he's set up that association of fire door inspectors, hasn't he?
Yes.
That, and has been very vocal and in a good way about fire door safety. He's kind of got all of the qualifications, as far as I'm aware. Ian's got all of the qualifications endorsement. So he's an FDIS qualified inspector. He's also certificated his business through Blue Sky certification. So there's no more hoops he can jump through in order to prove he's a bona fide fire door inspector. Like you say, there's others out there who've never really accredited in any way or went down that awful. Again, I'm being recorded. Got to be careful. There was the BRE or did that certification scheme, which was absolutely destroyed by the building inspectors at the time. I don't know how bad that was because we were starting to cop a load of flack for it because everyone thought we were running it.
Yeah.
And it was a case of actually saying, no, that's not our one. That's the one over there that we've had nothing to do with. So, we just got to be very careful about the credibility of some of the people. I know our names remain nameless, but I remember sitting down with one company who told me that they didn't care if people died in fires. It was good for business.
Crikey.
Nice one.
From Forum.
Yeah, both Ian and a guy called Neil Ashdown, who's
Neil
another.
Neil was the original FDIS manager, so Neil I know well as well. And he's from a joinery background. Can't think of the name of his business now. He sold up somewhere near Manchester.
They're both very vocal on the fact that being a member of an accredited organisation is not the answer. Because what they're saying is that there's people that just pay a fee, and then they're not actually doing the job, as it were, and so they're both on a campaign to get it to be UCAS accredited. It needs to be whatever
third party.
Yeah, third party. Yeah.
We're heading towards Hackett's vision, aren't we? Which was a license to practice. Which can only be a good thing, but we're talking 5 years, I think.
The other thing is apparently with if you're a member of one of these accredited organisations, you can employ one person that's been trained and certified can actually manage 20 people who haven't been trained.
News to me, George. How's that loophole exploited?
How is it exploited?
Well, how do you jump through it? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought you all had to be part and parcel of the same sort of training regime and certification. And
no, it's down to the only there's just one person, and as I understand it, so Ian's explained it to me. There's they can be responsible for 20 people.
I think that where that comes is some of the installation certification schemes. I think, again, people just have to remember that the installation certification schemes are primarily supervision schemes. So they are about process. So that you have to have a certain number of individuals trained in order to manage a workforce.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't know 1 in 20. I don't recognise the 1 in 20, but that may be true. The issue you've got. Practically, the issue you've got on the ground is that the contractual headroom for supervision may be insufficient to allow you to fulfil the needs of third-party certification. Because because I say 1 in 20 sounds extreme. I don't know which scheme that is, but I have had members come to me raising concerns that there's only a certain amount allowed in the contract for supervision. And they need to provide more than that in order to deliver the requirement of their third-party certification, and it creates a conflict for them, a real significant conflict for them, because they can't run the job at a loss, but they can't run the job at the price the price that they're being, and it's often a post-contractual squeeze. So again, you're seeing that research.
Yeah.
You priced it at one point, and then there's a sharpen your pencil round where the only thing you've got is to cut down on supervision. And that's the only thing that's left with anything in the job, and the pressure is to reduce the level of supervision that you've got, which can undermine your third-party certification.
Is it possible that that would be BM Trada that it'd be talking about?
Yeah, I mean, all of them, BM Trada, FireAS, IFC, they all have certification schemes, but mostly that mostly relates to installation. I don't know how Blue Sky are the only UCAS accredited third-party certification scheme for fire door inspections is the Blue Sky one, as far as I'm aware. There is commercials. You've always got to pick through the commercials, right? If you've got UCAS accredited certification, you're always going to say it's better than what everybody else has got. So there is a commercial situation. Both Neil and Ian of the fortunate position they've got Blue Sky certification. Others don't, and it is quite a time-consuming process to go through. And I know FDIS is going down the UCAS route anyway, so I know that they're trying to get UCAS accreditation. So there is a bit of a commercial thing going on there. But I didn't think for I don't know what Blue Sky's rules are around inspections, but I would think that I wouldn't think the 1 in 20 applied to inspections.
Mm-mm.
I think that's more like
it might be installations.
Yeah,
it might be installations.
And if you think about that in a way, that's 1 in 20 probably is heavy. But what's an average supervisor rate? I don't know what it is at the moment, Martin. Average workers per supervisor, 1 in 10, 1 in 15, 1 in 20 is probably not a million miles away from that.
Yeah, it's not a million miles away, no.
Depending on the package.
Yeah, way more importantly, George, what's the name of the cat?
My cat?
Yeah.
Stoker.
Stoker, loving the cat.
Yeah, as in Bram Stoker. Yeah. He's
question on the fire door stuff. So the fascinated I am with the cat. The fire door inspection. What's the output you're looking for that's related to BIM for housing? Because I can sort of see the commercial route there, but how does that link back to the BIM for housing work in terms of an output? What output are you driving towards?
We're going to produce a document that then is going to be freely available, which has a set of guidance for it. Have you seen the one that was done for the health service?
If I have, I've missed it, George.
Is it for checking doors, George, or installing doors?
Checking them.
All right.
What? Yeah.
But is that going to be? How does it work? What I'm trying to do, because I'm obviously trying to line all these things up as data management as well. Is it setting down sort of a data requirement, or is the data requirement what follows on from the first stage, which is the inspection standard?
There will be a data requirement, which we've already got. You've seen the publications that we've done in the past, haven't you?
Yeah. Not seen that one though.
Yeah, let me show. Let me just try to provide a bit of context.
Back to his product data sheet and who needs to give what information. So again, in my head, I've got product data sheet, product passport, and the 2 stages at which we sort of pass data through, and then that becomes your asset register at the end of when you hand it across. So it's a case of who needs to do what at the product data sheet and who needs to do what at the product passport stage in order to preserve the consistency and integrity of data. That's the bit that's sort of going through my head at the moment. And so the data sheet stuff for the manufacturer we haven't even nailed down yet, which makes the product passport stuff even more complex, doesn't it?
But without doubt, yeah. So right, so this, if you remember, is the methodology that we've used on all of the asset types.
Yeah.
So we've got the risks. What do people do to it to stop it from working? Got your cat flap there, and letterbox, and then the information that's needed for different stages.
Yeah.
And then information about what maintenance procedures are. So this is the bit that we're trying to flesh out, Ian.
Yeah.
And the only thing I could find that's in any sort of standard is Beza's SFG 20.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, I'd like to get to this type of, sort of reasonably explicit set of
Does anyone
information.
given you the? Now I'm trying to think where it was published. The BWF produced a checklist when
They
I
did.
was there.
Yeah, there's some better material out there, George. Definitely.
Excellent. Okay. Could you share it, and I'll try and
Find it
incorporate
I don't
it.
know if I can anymore because I think they pulled it all behind the paywall. Because I had it all
right.
out.
Okay.
I managed to give it away freely, George. But I think they've pulled a lot of it behind the paywall now.
So I'll just show you this now. This is the where am I now? So this is the healthcare document that we've been working to. So this was produced by these people. That was the working group. And it's got a number of different sections. As I say, the type 1 inspection, which is for new things, type 2, which is existing, type 3, which is fire door inspections, the regular maintenance or inspections, and then putting together a fire door plan. So this is what we're working on, really just broadly going through and taking out all the references to the NHS and hopefully adding in photographs from others as well. Is that helpful?
Yeah, as I say, the BWF, because I haven't been involved in the meetings, George, so I'm sort of playing a bit of catch up. But they've got the BWF. I'll put that one up there. I don't know how they're giving those out now, but there's 2 publications there that might be useful.
Thank you.
There's a best practice guide and there's an installation guide as well. Now, the installation guide was written by Hannah Mansell, who's on your list of circulation, but I don't think has attended a meeting. She's since gone on to become, you know Hannah, don't you, Martin?
I do, yeah.
She's since gone on to become technical director at Masonite.
At where, sorry?
At Masonite, which is the big, they own American-owned door company. They own Prem Door.
Oh, right, okay.
And there's another 2 door brands. Who's again my memory's failing me, but one's a composite door company.
Could that be Distinction Doors?
No, it's not Distinction, but they compete closely with Distinction. I want to say Total Doors or
what's her name? Hannah?
Hannah Mansell, yeah.
Okay.
She wrote both. I think she wrote the best practice guide. She certainly edited the last version of it I was involved in, and she wrote the installation guide, which is brilliant. It's a shame it's behind the paywall now, but it's a relatively modest paywall, I think.
It makes up most principal contractors' checklists and ITPs and quite good reference material.
So this is it, Martin, or Ian, sorry. Yeah. So it's quite detailed.
Certainly is.
So if we can get something remotely like this for BIM for housing, and we make it free, then I think that would be a good thing. Anyway, and
it is.
I want to try and do the same ideally for AOVs, initially smoke vents, smoke control, dampers and things like that, which is what we're kicking off tomorrow. And if you've got anybody that might want to contribute to that, Martin, then maybe somebody from Balfour Beatty called Patrick.
Yeah, but
in fact,
he's skiing this week.
Yeah, the skiing man, isn't it? Yeah. That's Peter, is it? Did you say?
No, Peter's the clerk of works. David is the skier.
Yeah, so yeah.
BBK.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I need to pick up with him. Yeah, so I think if we can get some sort of at least what we're doing is getting people talking about it.
Yeah. I'll see if I can find any other collateral, George, to share with you on inspections. Yeah, I'll see what I've got.
Yeah, my apologies, George, because I know I've been terrible at attending those meetings. I just keep falling on days I can't make at the moment.
No, sure.
Yeah. Actually, down a gypsum mine tomorrow, George, so I won't be making it either.
Is it up in Leek, Martin?
Yeah.
It's good. I did that a few weeks ago for the first time. Really good, interesting trip.
Did you ever do their academy, their defect academy?
No.
No.
The only one I've ever seen was your one.
I know. Well, that was I went to the mine. This is about 10 years ago, but and it might even be longer. I went to the mine, and they took me to the defect academy, and they said, "You know what you're doing. Go in there and tell us what's wrong." So I came out, with a spring in my step, saying I found 6 things that were wrong. And they said, "Well done. It's more than most people get, but there's 20." That just took me on a journey. That did. It really did.
I don't know if you ever saw Neil Ashdown's probably still got it, George. We had Neil knocked us up when we did we did Fire X one year, and Neil mocked us up a mini door, which was actually sat in my kids loved it. When my kids were little, they used to love it because it was like a little functioning fire door, and it was only about it was about half like normal size. They used to love going in and out of it. We had it on the exhibition stand, and we did a similar thing. How many defects can you find? And I can't remember. I think there were 21 defects on the door. Most people got to about 12. The problem was by the end of the week there was 24.
It's hanging off
because it just got banging about quite a lot. So all of a sudden you started to see new defects creeping in. So it was sort of it was a moving feast, let's say. He's probably still got it somewhere. It was a cracking little for exhibitions. It was brilliant because you could just put it on the stand. Everyone knew what it was, and everyone loves trying to spot a defect, right? It was.
Yeah. So that's percentage, George, that you came up with, the 25% that you were talking about earlier for some fire doors, according to some institution or another. When I did the work with BG about 10 years ago, firewalls made out of metal stud partitions, 10% of those were compliant. That was new install.
Wow.
I think we're a bit better, but we're nowhere near 100 as an industry.
Yeah. I'm working with a firm of inspectors in Nottingham, and one of the directors there, his name is Joe Allen, and he used to run the academy at BG. So he's he's got a lot of experience of doing inspections of the walls.
Good on him. Yeah. It's amazing. It's really surprising. It's not dissimilar to doors or service penetrations. There is a lot to know. That's why you have specialists. That's why you need the specialists involved early on in order to advise the architects, because the architects don't know any more than the principal contractors. I'm not blaming people here. They just don't know. So
Well, I don't know if you saw it at the weekend. That somebody posted something up on LinkedIn. In fact, it was one of the Bin for Housing guys, Steve Coppin, and it was posted up. It was a guy trying to get out of a fire door that was closed because it was a pressurized vent system.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, very powerful, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was all right if you were healthy and there wasn't a fire, but
yeah, quite. But it just shows how complicated. That's why we do need to have that holistic perspective, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, no sign of Fionn or Peter, unfortunately, coming back. So
yeah,
don't want to drag it on any longer than we need to. Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up?
I'll just drop on the table that we launched our on following on from that discussion about firewalls. We've launched our pre-construction guide to dry lining, which we put out at Future Build last week, with a view to trying to get stuff done, what needs to be done before we arrive on site. You remember that research I talked about a few months ago, we had the 17% rework. We decided that there was sort of a void in our information, which is that we had a site guide, we had a best practice guide, and we had a specifiers guide, but this sort of just really honing in on that pre-construction stage was important. So we pulled that out. So I'll share it again. I'll pop a link in the chat so we've got that to use.
I might sound a silly question, but on Thursday I've got another workshop with the supply chain that we use, and Joe, has he got access to that, Ian?
Yeah, Joe's got access to that. So Joe, when I say access, Joe, in fact, Joe didn't write this one. We got Matt Taylor wrote it for us. So we used Matt on a retained basis to do some dry lining specific stuff. He runs Taylor Design Consultancy in his
okay. Know the name, yeah.
Yeah,
he's very good.
Yeah. Well, his name crops up in some of these workshops that we're running with our supply chain. What we've got to do is tap that knowledge into this shift to the left for stages 3 and 4. It's as simple as that.
What Matt's been doing for us. So we've been giving Matt a lot of insight from the research that he and I constructed. That original site, that original piece of research was Matt and I sat down and banged it into a questionnaire, and then we commissioned Matt to write that report, and Joe's done all the sort of editing and support for him, because Matt's one of those very, very detailed people. He just disappears down that rabbit hole of detail very quickly. So Joe's been sort of helping to pull him back up so it turns into a guide. But yeah, he's brilliant and just committed, isn't he? He just wants to make a difference, does Matt? So he's been a great support to us. So there's two guys there: the site guide, which is a recut, and then we pulled all the pre-construction stuff out and said, let's make that available. A bit like the stuff you're trying to do there, George, with the BIM for Housing Fire Door stuff. It's get this information in an easy format that people can use.
Yeah, the other thing that I just wanted to, I think I've mentioned already, but we've talked about getting the product data into a free library that people can use. That's now working. The software's working, so we can make that available under the BIM for Housing banner. But also, we've got Lloyd's Register agreed to certify that the manufacturers, that it's actually come from the manufacturers, as it were, because I think that's going to be an increasingly important thing in terms of ensuring that the information can be verified. But that needs to be optional for the manufacturers, in my view, because the manufacturers need to be able to, because there's too many paid for, in my view, there's too many fragmented paid for services, because you've got all the different BIM store, BIM object, you don't know where to get the information from. Whereas my belief is that you need to that we need a place that this information can be stored, and BSI Identify, they're on board with the idea. So I think that's something we ought to be pushing forward with.
Is there any opportunity to use the leverage of BIM for Housing to put pressure back on Lexicon again, George? Because I feel that, again, for me, that's kind of a big missing piece of the jigsaw, is we're not agreeing standardization around data sheets. And as a consequence, we're still not really exchanging consistent data.
I do agree with you, but I don't think so. No, unfortunately, it just seems to have that I don't think there's real desire. That's the problem. I think
that's commercial, isn't it? It's commercial block. I think there's desire from the industry to sort it. It's just there's commercial barriers in place to getting it done, and that's kind of what Lexicon broke down, was those commercial barriers.
I agree, definitely. I mean, it was my idea, so
Yeah, no,
I
it's I mean, and it's inspiring. It's the right thing to do, but sometimes like we sort of lose sight of the right thing because it's difficult. And I just think maybe because I don't know what I've lost all track of what's happening with NEMA, George. And I know Ben for Housing's linked into the NEMA group, but I've lost all understanding of what's going on at NEMA now. If I'm honest, it seems to be drifting.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think as ever, again, off the record, I think the rebranding, as is I do agree that we need to move away from people thinking it's all about 3D modeling, and it should be about information. But I think, given the fact that 95% of the people will think about BIM, to remove BIM completely from the whole remit of the UK BIM Alliance seems crazy.
Just seems like we're slipping into that. The organisation is becoming more important than the job, which
Exactly.
is the danger of the world that I live in. Right. That's, I mean, the path FIS is treading is hard because we're trying to be non-commercial about all of these things, and give them away and share them, which means you don't realise the value of them through membership in the way ideally you'd like, because much as in an ideal world the sector rewards good bodies that do good things, that's not always true. But my view remains that the job is more important than the organisational structure, and we have to be sacrosanct. Unfortunately,
I mean,
that's where now, and that's it's undermining development and change, and NEMA's got to step up or step out for me.
Yeah, I think the thing is as well that there's a lot of BIM consultants who are part of probably steering NEMA, and BIM consultants are naturally going to want to keep it relatively complex. I don't mean that in an unpleasant way, but that's so. For example, BIM level 2. Yeah. Now,
which we're not allowed
for
to
the
talk
last
about, are we?
exactly for the last probably 4 or 5 years, you've not been able to use the term BIM level 2. It's now ISO 19650 Part 2 compliant. Now, I don't think that's the right way forward, because at the end of the day, in most contracts, even you'll see BIM level 2. Not written in new contracts, but in the it's a common language. People understood the different. There was level 1, level 2, level 3. And I think simply changing the name, taking it out of the lexicon, as it were, is not not a way forward.
No, it's
That's
a
my
shame
view.
Fiona's not on, because I think Fiona is my pivot with NEMA now. So I think
He is,
So he's our. But it's a shame he's not here to. And we've not had a chance to catch up outside of this. But again, we're rebranding when maybe this is something, Martin, in terms of your conversations using BB to try and drive some of this through the CIC is. We need to get back to that standardized approach to structured data, or it's a beggar's muddle, right?
Yeah.
The plan of works has got to line up. The data's got to line up against the plan of works in the same way. I've sent you the sideways thing. They're happy for me to share it with you, Martin. So I've sent that across.
Thank you. You're a good man. You're a good
And
man.
that's
we tried a little bit of this with the MOD. But they are stuck in BIM terminology, BIM language. Some of their questions that they ask to see whether or not you're a suitable contractor revolve around, what's your BIM strategy and what you're doing about BIM. And it really is like winding the clock back 7 or 8 years. It's like it when it was new, there was and so we tried to sort of say to them, guys, it's all moved on. We're talking about other things now. We're talking about information management and what have you, but they're a big customer, and they're not untypical of the way the government's still at in terms of procurement. So it's a big problem. It's still stuck in that world.
I spent a fair bit of the weekend working on something for a client where they're being asked to take over at handover the responsibility of keeping the BIM model up to date. And I've told them that they shouldn't accept that responsibility. And I've been telling them that for about 18 months now, because what they're being asked to do is actually impossible.
Mm.
Yeah. But it's a few words in a contract that they signed up to 5 or 6 years ago. And also, it's being interpreted at the moment that all of the room data sheets, for example, this is for a university complex, but even for a hospital, it would be even more complex. The room data sheets are a contractual deliverable, right? And therefore, they are expected to keep the room data sheets up to date, but not just that, to keep them up to date by updating the BIM model. And they can't do it. It's impossible, right? And the reason it's impossible is because those room data sheets were produced using a specialist application that the architect used called Codebook, and they were done at a point in time. And even the main contractor who was employing the architect, when they came to do the final verification of what was actually installed in each room, they went in and edited the Word version of a 2,500 page set of room data sheets. Yeah, because they couldn't update the BIM model because they didn't have this specialist software. And even if they bought a license for it, there's all sorts of reasons why it couldn't have been done. So the reason I'm mentioning it, so we're trying to explain this to the SPV at the moment, and it's beyond their comprehension as to why it can't be done.
This is the kind of thing that NEMA should be picking up, because again, JCT, let's go back to the other sources of all of our problems. JCT hasn't been updated since 2016. The whole information management conversation shifted on there, but there's no standard terms around it that reflect the way that we're working now. It's one of the many areas that JCT is absent on watch at the moment, because they're not evolving with the sector. You know, since 2016 they were last updated. We've had a bloody pandemic. We've exited the European Union. We've had a major overhaul of the building safety regulations. We've had inflation like none of us have ever encountered in our professional career. Many of us, there may be some on this call who've known it, but I haven't. That have been way beyond anything we've experienced before, linked to fluctuation clauses which don't reflect the way that any data is held about material price movement anyway. And you've just got this beggar's muddle of contracts that NEMA this is where NEMA should be stepping up, petitioning JCT to put the right information management clauses in and agreeing what the fair share of information risk should be for a standard term contract. And at the moment, they're faffing around with a logo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Still being recorded, right?
I'm going to play that one back. Great speech, E. Great speech.
Sorry.
Hi, Fionn. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm really sorry, guys. I've been stuck on a phone for ages there. It's still actually going, but apologies.
Okay.
No worries. But we did have a question for you, or more accurate. Ian was sort of saying what your sort of contacts or your liaison that you have with NEMA, is that getting you anywhere? Is that getting anywhere? Is that moving on?
How to answer that one? It's sluggishly moving along, right?
The long pause answered it, didn't it, Fionn? Isn't that bad?
What was that, Ian? Go on.
I think the long pause answered it, Fionn. I think.
Yeah, I mean it's God, it's not clear cut, is it? I mean, with regard to affiliates, you know, which is the bit I'm involved in, the only update I've got for you, which I might have even mentioned last time, people have. Casey is one of the main guys. You probably all know Casey. He's mentioned recently enough that there seems to be a better chance now to involve REBA in discussions that they seem to have got their hands on someone. The name hasn't become available to me, but someone who's receptive to being involved, because Reba are not involved. Now, if you think about that for a minute, Reba not being involved in this is a major problem. So that's the update on that one. It'll become hopefully a little clearer as of, let me just see, there's a meeting booked in for this Friday. So I think on Friday we'll have an update, which I'll be sure to share with you on whether we've progressed anywhere with getting a Reba representative to look at some alignment with those guys.
I'll ping you a separate email, Phil, with a few thoughts of just off the back of the little rant I just had. About how we're not making any progress on contractual issues around information management.
Yeah,
sorry, go on.
Well, it's a good point. There's a girl that I'm working with. So what we do with Nima is we kind of co-lead by quarters the affiliates, and I'm co-leading with Sarah Kite at the moment, who's got a legal background and her interest is on contracts. And there's an event that you guys may be interested in that I'll dig up the details of, where she is progressing something with, I think, JCT. All right, so yeah, how well publicized that all is and who's supposed to be going to that, I don't know, being honest, but bear with me till I see if I can dig out anything on that.
I think we are due a JCT review next year, I think. So if there's anything going to happen.
What, a review of the standard form of contract?
My understanding is they are going to republish the full suite of contracts. I don't know who's representing who at what stages in those discussions. I've lost track of all of it. They've got these colleges, haven't they, that take control over different parts of the contractual structure, and it's all based on what people did 40 years ago, as far as I can tell.
No, I'm with you on that. I mean, as it stands now, it's not really fit for purpose, is it? But I'll see if I can dig up and circulate after this meeting that event. I think it's an in-person event. You guys, if you're interested, I'm sure are cordially invited along to that to see where they're going with it. Rather than waste your time watching me scurrying around my emails, probably not best use of everyone's time. Right?
I think one of the frustrations I've got is that the devil's very much in the detail, and what I think we need to be doing, and that's why I was just saying, Fiona, I've been spending time over the weekend writing something that explains why the contractor can't have produced the information that our customer, who's the FM contractor, is being asked to inherit and take responsibility for. It's because there's an unrealistic expectation of what this magical BIM thing does. That we've got 27 work packages. We've probably had over 100 BIM models that have all been federated, but they're individual files. We've got all the 1 to 50s and the schedules and the and room data sheets that have all been generated at different stages by different people. And then I was just explaining that you can't simply then go and make a change. If you go and make a change to a room in your BIM model and then try and recreate all of those outputs, it can't be done. In practice, it can't be done because they've used CodeBook to create the room data sheets, and the main contractor doesn't have CodeBook, so therefore they went, and understandably, the only option that they had was to go and manually edit all the room data sheets. And therefore there's no there's no way of validating whether what was in the room we found a couple of other honeys where
Well, sorry, George, before you go on, just on that one, when you say there's no way to validate it, that I'm just playing devil's advocate for a second. There's no way to validate it using data.
Yeah, the only way of doing it is to do it literally manually.
This is it. This is the thing, isn't it? Where
Yeah.
it devolves, if that's the right word. I don't know if it is, but that's the tried and tested, isn't it? Suddenly we're printing out. We're doing side by side markups. But it technically could be done. It's just not going to be done as it ought to be done.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that certainly the checking, and they have checked. They've checked. They've taken the room data sheets. They've gone in the rooms. They've checked to make sure that what's in the room data sheets has actually been installed. What I'm saying is that the way things are described in the BIM model and the way they're described on the room data sheets are different. The descriptions are different. And then moving on from there, if changes have taken place, even if you change them in the BIM model, you then regenerate the room data sheets. You can't automatically compare the two because, again, they've not used standardized descriptions.
Yeah.
And the other honey is that when you've got families with assemblies, then you can't actually generate you can't export them as anyway. But all I'm saying is there's a lot of technical stuff that this magical BIM thing, you can't simply say that's the way in which if there's some information missing, that's a defect. And we need to recognize, I mean, the job's been done really well, don't get me wrong. I think it's much better than most of the projects we've worked on, but it's not 100%. And when you've got ambulance chasers in the market that are going along trying to find defects, and there's quite a lot, Martin, where they're finding digital defects, and that then becomes as critical. Then we have to have we've got to be reasonable. At the end of the day, the whole point about this process was to deliver better asset information. That's really what it was all about.
Yeah.
And certainly if the project has been done using BIM, it will deliver better asset information, but it won't be perfect. Yeah. And therefore, if it's the case that somebody has got to take on a liability because of the way the contract's been written, that either, in your case, Balfour Beatty has produced a perfect model of a hospital or something like that, or the receiving party, the FMCO, is accepting that they've got a perfect model. It's mad. You can't do it. So I don't know how contractually we deal with that. Other than best endeavors.